Real chess is for real families, Richard Whitmore said, and the $20 bill slid across the white tablecloth like something thrown from a higher world. It passed a crystal water glass, brushed the edge of a silver fork, picked up a thin streak of red sauce from the plate beside it, and stopped near the small wooden chessboard where his daughter had been losing all evening. For 1 second, nobody at the dinner table moved. The chandelier above the room burned with a soft golden light, touching polished plates, wine glasses, pearl earrings, cuff links, the clean white cuffs of men who spoke about markets as if entire neighborhoods were just numbers on a screen. At the far end of that table sat Richard Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Capital, white-haired at the temples, smooth-faced, calm in the cruel way powerful men become calm when they believe the room already belongs to them. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His smile did the cutting for him. "Here," he said, looking at the black boy standing near the kitchen doorway. "Buy yourself a toy board. Leave real chess to real families." The boy's name was Caleb Carter. He was 12 years old, thin-shouldered, quiet, wearing a Navy school sweater that had faded at the elbows and sneakers his mother had cleaned with dish soap that morning. He had been waiting for Denise Carter, his mother, to finish her shift as a maid inside the Whitmore estate, a house so large the front hallway alone felt wider than the apartment they rented above a laundromat on the south side of the city. Caleb had not asked to be seen. He had not asked to join the dinner. He had been standing where children of workers were supposed to stand in houses like that, close enough to be called, far enough to be forgotten. But a chessboard has a strange way of pulling the truth out of silence. Olivia Whitmore, Richard's 13-year-old daughter, had been playing a practice game against Mr. Graham Bell, the private chess coach Richard paid $500 an hour to train her before the regional junior tournament. Olivia had moved her knight too early, then pushed a bishop without seeing the trap waiting 3 moves ahead. Caleb saw it. He saw it the way some children see lightning before the thunder reaches everyone else. He did not mean to embarrass her. He did not mean to speak out of place. The words slipped from him softly, almost under his breath. If she moves the bishop, she loses the queen. That was all. Just one sentence. But at Richard Whitmore's table, one sentence from the maid's son was treated like broken glass on marble. A few guests turned their heads slowly. Preston Hale, Richard's business partner, gave a short breath through his nose, not quite a laugh, but close enough to wound. Denise froze behind Mrs. Whitmore's chair, the silver water pitcher still tilted slightly in her hand, a drop trembling at the lip but not falling. Caleb looked at the chessboard, not at the money. The $20 bill lay there between him and Richard, stained now, small and ugly against all that expensive white. Richard leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach, enjoying the performance he believed he had created. "Go on, then," he said. "Show us what you think you know. 6 moves should be enough to entertain everyone before dessert." The room waited for Caleb to shrink. His mother wanted to step forward, to apologize, to pull him back into the safety of the kitchen light. But Caleb only reached into the pocket of his sweater and touched the old, chipped plastic knight he carried everywhere, the last piece from the board his father had left behind. Then he lifted his eyes, calm and dark under the chandelier's glow, and for the first time that night, Richard Whitmore's smile had nowhere to land. Caleb had learned early that some rooms did not need signs to tell him where he was allowed to stand. At the Whitmore estate, the front staircase was for guests, the marble hallway was for polished shoes, the dining room was for people whose names appeared on buildings, and the kitchen was for his mother, for wet towels, for quiet footsteps, for the smell of roasted vegetables and lemon soap rising under the hum of stainless steel vents. He knew the map by heart because he had spent almost every Friday night there since school started, sitting on a low stool near the pantry with his homework balanced on his knees while Denise Carter moved through the house like a shadow trained not to touch the light. She was 35, though tiredness sometimes placed a few extra years around her eyes. She wore her hair pinned back neatly, her black uniform pressed clean, her white apron tied twice at the waist because the knot slipped when she carried too much at once. She never complained in front of Caleb. Not about the bus ride across town, not about the late shifts, not about the way certain people said her name only when something had spilled. She believed dignity was something you kept folded inside yourself, like an emergency dollar tucked behind a family photograph. Caleb believed that too, but in a different way. His dignity lived inside 64 squares. On a chessboard, no piece was rich. No piece was poor. A pawn could cross the board and become something more, not because someone allowed it, but because the rules said it had survived long enough to earn the right. His father, Marcus Carter, had taught him that when Caleb was 5 years old, sitting at a card table in their old apartment while rain tapped the window air conditioner like impatient fingers. Marcus had a laugh that filled small rooms, a gentle voice, and hands that treated each chess piece as if it had a pulse. He used to say, "Do not move because you are scared, son. Move because you see." Caleb did not fully understand those words then. He understood them after his father got sick, after the tournament posters came down from the refrigerator, after the phone calls stopped coming, after adults began speaking in soft tones whenever Caleb entered the room. The old plastic chess set was all he had left from those evenings. Half the black pieces were scuffed. One white rook had a crack down the side. The knight in his pocket had one ear chipped off, but Caleb carried it everywhere, rubbing the worn edge with his thumb whenever the world became too loud. And now the world was very loud, even inside the silence of Richard Whitmore's dining room. Caleb could feel every stare pressing against his skin. He could smell butter, steak, candle wax, and the sharp polish on the table. He could hear his mother breathing behind him, shallow and careful, the way she breathed when rent was due or when someone at work spoke to her like kindness would cost them money. But beneath all of that, he heard his father's voice, steady as a clock. "Move because you see." Caleb stepped toward the board. Not fast, not proud, just forward. Denise whispered his name, barely more than air, but he did not turn around. He looked at Olivia first, because she was not the one who had thrown the money. Her cheeks were pink with embarrassment, her fingers twisted in her napkin, and for a moment Caleb saw that she was trapped too, not by poverty, but by expectation. Then he looked at Mr. Bell, whose eyes had narrowed with the first flicker of professional curiosity. Finally, Caleb looked at Richard Whitmore, sitting back beneath the golden chandelier, as if waiting for a child to prove his place. Caleb pulled out the chair, sat down, and placed both hands in his lap. The $20 bill remained near the board, still stained, still untouched. In the kitchen doorway, Denise stood very still, and the whole house seemed to lean closer to hear what her son would do next. Richard Whitmore had built his life on rooms going quiet when he entered them. Boardrooms, charity galas, private clubs, campaign dinners, investor retreats in Aspen, glass towers in downtown Chicago with his name etched near the elevators. All of them had taught him the same lesson. Power was not only what a man owned, but what other people stopped doing when he looked their way. They stopped laughing. They stopped questioning. They stopped taking up space. In his world, silence was agreement. And agreement was something he expected before dessert arrived. That was why Caleb Carter bothered him. It was not only that the boy had spoken from the edge of the dining room. It was the way he had spoken, not begging, not joking, not trying to impress anyone, just stating what he saw as if truth did not require permission. Richard hated that kind of calm in people he considered beneath him. It made the walls feel less certain. He lifted his wine glass and let the red surface catch the chandelier light before taking a slow sip. Around him sat people who knew how to read his moods. Preston Hale with his polished watch and careful smile, 2 senior investors from New York, a retired judge who now advised private companies, and Eleanor Whitmore, his wife, sitting so straight her pearls did not move when she breathed. Eleanor had learned long ago that Richard preferred elegance over interruption. She glanced once at Denise, then at Caleb, and something like discomfort passed across her face, but she said nothing. Richard noticed that too. He noticed everything when he wanted control. The dining room itself seemed designed to prove his point. The table had been shipped from Italy, dark walnut polished until it reflected candle flames. The rug beneath it cost more than Denise earned in a year. The walls held oil paintings of horses, ships, and stern-faced ancestors who had never missed a meal they could not afford. On the sideboard, covered dishes rested under silver lids, keeping warm food hidden like a privilege waiting to be revealed. Richard looked at Caleb sitting at the chessboard and smiled again, smaller this time. "Mr. Bell," he said, turning toward the coach, "please do not go easy on him. We would not want our young expert here thinking the world rewards confidence without substance." A few guests gave soft, obedient chuckles. Mr. Graham Bell did not. He was in his late 60s, narrow-shouldered, with careful eyes and a face that had spent decades hiding disappointment from children who cried after losing tournaments. He had seen prodigies, pretenders, wealthy students, frightened students, and parents who treated trophies like family investments. He had also seen the way Caleb looked at the board. Not at the people, not at the money. The board. That mattered. Olivia sat beside her father, her hands folded tightly now. She was used to Richard turning small mistakes into public lessons. Her chess lessons had begun as a birthday gift, then became a schedule, then a performance, then another way for her father to say the Whitmore name should win at everything it touched. Caleb had seen her mistake because he was watching the game. Richard had seen only a chance to remind everyone of rank. "All right," Mr. Bell said quietly, moving the pieces back to the position from Olivia's game. His voice was gentle, but his eyes stayed sharp. "We will begin from here." Caleb nodded once. Denise stood by the kitchen doorway with the water pitcher pressed close to her apron, feeling the cold silver through the fabric. Every instinct in her wanted to protect her son from this room, from these faces, from the kind of laughter that left no mark but still stayed for years. Yet Caleb did not look afraid. He looked small in the large chair, his sneakers not quite touching the rug, his school sweater playing against the carved wood and crystal light. But his fingers were steady when he reached toward the board. Richard leaned back, ready to watch him fail. The room leaned with him. Then Caleb moved his knight. The knight landed on F7 with a soft wooden click, so small a sound that it should have disappeared beneath the breathing of the room. But instead it seemed to travel through every glass, every plate, every polished inch of the long table. Mr. Bell looked down, then up at Caleb, and the first change in the room was not fear or shock, but confusion. It was an odd move. Not careless, not flashy, but quiet in the dangerous way a closed door is quiet when someone has locked it from the other side. Olivia leaned forward before she could stop herself. She knew enough chess to recognize that the knight was stepping into pressure, maybe even inviting capture. Preston Hale smiled, relieved to have something to mock. "That is brave," he said, stretching the word until it meant foolish. Richard gave a short laugh and tapped one finger beside his wineglass. "Well, there it is. Confidence without instruction." Caleb did not answer. His eyes stayed on the board. He had heard men like Richard before, not in mansions, but in school offices, in tournament lobbies, in the careful voices of adults who looked at his address before they looked at his score sheets. He had learned that some people asked questions only because they wanted your answer to prove what they already believed. Mr. Bell moved after a pause, sliding his bishop out with professional caution. The piece crossed the board cleanly, ivory against dark squares, and stopped where almost anyone would have placed it. Caleb reached for a pawn. One square forward. Another small click. Denise felt her throat tighten. She knew nothing about advanced chess, not the names of openings, not the hidden math beneath those silent pieces, but she knew her son. She knew when he was guessing, and she knew when he had gone somewhere deep inside his mind where the world could not touch him. This was the second kind. His shoulders had lowered. His breathing had slowed. Even the $20 bill beside the board seemed to fade from his awareness, as if insult was just another piece that had already moved and could not move again. Eleanor Whitmore set her fork down carefully. The sound was delicate, but Richard noticed. "Eleanor," he said without looking at her, "you are missing the entertainment." She looked at Caleb, then at Denise, and for once her voice came softer than manners required. "I do not think he is trying to entertain us." The sentence hung there, thin but real. Richard turned his head slightly, not enough to argue, only enough to remind her whose table this was. Mr. Bell made his next move. A rook shifted to the open file. It was clean, sensible, safe. Caleb did not look surprised. He touched the chipped knight in his pocket with his left hand, while his right hand lifted his queen just 2 squares, placing it where no one expected power to go so early. Olivia inhaled. Mr. Bell stopped with his fingers still hovering above the board. He saw one line, then another, then a third, darker one, appearing behind the first 2 like a hallway in a dream. Caleb had not defended. He had not retreated. He had pointed every piece toward a future the room had not yet reached. Richard, still smiling, did not see it. Preston did not see it. The guests did not see it. But Mr. Bell did, and the color left his face slowly, like winter spreading across glass. Mr. Bell did not move for so long that Richard finally noticed. At first, the CEO seemed amused by the old coach's silence, as if even hesitation could be turned into proof that the evening belonged to him. He leaned forward, resting his elbows near the edge of the table, the candlelight cutting hard lines across his face. "Is there a problem, Graham?" he asked. The coach blinked once. "No problem," he said, but his voice had lost its usual calm. "I am just considering the position." Preston Hale gave a soft laugh and lifted his glass. "Against a 12-year-old? The guest smiled again, but this time the smiles were weaker, less certain, like lights flickering during a storm. Caleb sat still, hands folded after his move, eyes lowered to the board. He could feel the room changing shape around him. Before, the people at the table had been looking down at him. Now some of them were looking at the pieces. That was always the first crack. His father had taught him that too. People who do not respect you may still respect the danger they can finally see. Mr. Bell reached for his knight, paused, then chose the safer square. A defensive move. Not the move of a man teaching a child, but the move of a man protecting himself from a loss he had not expected to be possible. Caleb saw the retreat and understood what it meant. He moved his bishop next, sliding it along the diagonal until it pointed straight into the heart of Mr. Bell's position. The wooden piece stopped with another quiet click. Fourth move. Olivia put both hands over her mouth. She was not sure why, only that something beautiful and frightening had just happened on the board. Richard's face tightened. He looked from Olivia to the coach, then to Caleb, and the old ease in his posture began to harden into something colder. "Denise," he said suddenly. Her name sounded different in his mouth, less like a name and more like a warning. Denise stepped forward half an inch. "Yes, sir." Richard did not take his eyes off Caleb. "Did you bring your son into my dining room tonight to make some kind of point?" The question struck the air with more weight than volume. Denise's fingers tightened around the pitcher handle. "No, sir. He was only waiting for me to finish my shift. Then perhaps he should remember where waiting ends and manners begin." Caleb looked at his mother then, only for a second. Her face carried everything. She was trying not to say, "Be careful. Do not give them a reason. Come back to the kitchen. Let me keep this job." Richard saw that look and used it. "Your mother works hard here," he said, each word polished smooth. It would be unfortunate if one little performance made people question her judgment. The dining room went still in a different way. This was no longer a joke wrapped in money. This was pressure. This was the invisible line that kept families like the Carters quiet and houses like the Whitmore's house. Eleanor's lips parted, but again no words came. Preston looked down at his plate. Even the retired judge stopped turning his ring. Caleb felt heat rise behind his eyes. Not tears, not fear, but the old ache of watching his mother stand smaller so other people could feel tall. He placed his left hand into his pocket and closed it around the chipped knight. Its broken edge pressed into his palm, familiar and real. He heard Marcus Carter's voice from years ago, soft over the sound of rain and a cheap window air conditioner. Never answer insult with anger when the board can answer better. Caleb turned back. Mr. Bell made another move, slower now, his fingertips careful, his breathing measured. Caleb saw the final shape forming. He lifted his rook. Fifth move. The rook slid across the board and stopped on the open file Mr. Bell had abandoned too late. The old coach whispered something under his breath. Richard heard it and frowned. "What did you say?" Mr. Bell did not answer. He was staring at the board as if a locked room had opened in front of him. The $20 bill still lay beside the pieces, stained and forgotten. Caleb released the rook, sat back, and waited for the last door to close. The room had entered that strange kind of silence that does not feel empty, but crowded. It crowded Caleb's ears, his chest, the spaces between his fingers. The tall windows reflected the dining room back at itself, doubling the candles, the silver lids, the faces turned toward the board, as if even the glass wanted to witness what no one knew how to name yet. Outside, beyond the wide lawn and the black iron gate, Chicago evening pressed against the house in cold. Blue layers. Inside, the chandelier kept burning warm and gold, but the warmth did not reach Denise. She stood near the doorway with the pitcher lowered now, both hands around it, feeling the water inside shift with the smallest tremor of her grip. She wanted to step between Caleb and the room. She wanted to say he was a child, that he had school in the morning, that they did not come here to challenge anyone. But she also knew the look on her son's face. It was the look Marcus used to wear over old tournament boards in community centers and church basements, where folding chairs scraped the floor and players leaned close under buzzing lights. Denise remembered Marcus teaching Caleb with a plastic set on their kitchen table, explaining patience with a tenderness that made even silence feel safe. She remembered him saying every piece deserved respect because every piece carried a purpose. Back then, Caleb had been too small to reach the board without kneeling on a chair. Now he sat in a millionaire's dining room with his feet barely touching an imported rug, holding more dignity than every polished object around him. Mr. Bell slowly removed his glasses and cleaned them with a cloth from his jacket pocket, though there was nothing on the lenses. It was a gesture meant to buy time. Richard saw the gesture and disliked it. He had paid for certainty. He had paid for polish, obedience, results. He had not paid $500 an hour to watch a respected coach hesitate before a child in a faded sweater. "Graham," Richard said, his voice low enough that everyone had to listen harder. "Finish the game." Mr. Bell put his glasses back on. "I am trying to understand the game." That answer landed more heavily than anyone expected. Olivia looked at her father, then at Caleb. Her embarrassment had changed into something else now, something close to wonder. Caleb did not look proud. He looked far away, as if the dining room had thinned around him and another room had appeared beneath it, one with rain at the window, a cheap table, a tired father smiling through pain while arranging pawns in neat rows. The chipped knight in Caleb's pocket warmed under his thumb. He could almost hear Marcus breathing beside him. "Do not rush the winning move. Let the truth arrive on time." Caleb looked at the stained $20 bill beside the board. A few minutes ago, it had been thrown like a verdict. Now it looked weightless, a small green square unable to buy back the quiet it had created. Richard shifted in his chair. Preston stopped smiling. Eleanor's hand rested near her water glass, but she did not lift it. Even the kitchen staff had gone still beyond the swinging door, their shadows faint behind the frosted glass. Mr. Bell reached for his queen, then pulled his hand back. He reached for his king, then stopped again. There was no safe square that did not open another danger. There was no graceful way to pretend this was still a lesson. Caleb waited until the coach finally made the only move left, a move that looked defensive to everyone except the two people at the board. Then Caleb breathed in once, slow and quiet. He took his hand from his pocket. His fingers moved toward the bishop, and the whole room seemed to hold its breath with him. Caleb moved the bishop to G6, and the piece stopped with a click so clean it seemed to cut the air in half. For a moment, nothing happened. No one gasped. No one understood. The board looked almost ordinary to the guests, just carved wood and neat pieces under candlelight, a small battlefield arranged between dessert plates and crystal glasses. Then Mr. Bell slowly leaned back. His face did not collapse all at once. It changed in pieces. First his eyes widened. Then his jaw loosened. Then the hand resting near his captured pawn went still, fingers slightly curled, as if he had reached for a door and found it already locked. Olivia whispered, "What happened?" Mr. Bell did not answer her. He was counting. Richard could see it. The old coach's eyes moved from king to rook, from rook to queen, from queen to the knight Caleb had placed so strangely at the beginning. One line became two. Two became four. Every escape square had a shadow on it. Every defensive move created a worse one. 6 moves. 6 quiet moves from a boy Richard had tried to reduce to a joke. Mr. Bell looked at Caleb with something Richard had not expected to see from a man he paid to teach his daughter. Respect. Not kindness. Not pity. Respect. "That is not a trick," Mr. Bell said softly. "That is a forced sequence." Preston frowned. "Meaning what?" Mr. Bell swallowed. "Meaning I am lost." The words did not echo, but they might as well have. Denise closed her eyes for half a second, not in triumph, but in relief so deep it almost hurt. Caleb kept his hands in his lap. He did not smile. The victory had not made him bigger. It had only made the room finally notice the size he had always been. Richard's face went pale beneath the warm light. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that he beat you from that position?" Mr. Bell looked back at the board. "I am telling you he saw 6 moves ahead before I saw the first trap." Olivia leaned closer, her voice small now. "Caleb, how did you know?" Caleb looked at the bishop, then at the chipped knight still hidden in his pocket. "My father showed me that pattern." Mr. Bell's attention sharpened. Your father? Caleb nodded. Marcus Carter. The name struck the old coach before it reached anyone else. Mr. Bell removed his glasses again, but this time he did not pretend to clean them. He simply held them in one hand and stared at Caleb as if a photograph from another lifetime had begun breathing in front of him. Marcus Carter from Detroit? He asked. Denise opened her eyes. Richard's fingers tightened around the stem of his glass. Caleb nodded again. He was my dad. Mr. Bell sat back slowly. Your father was one of the most natural attacking players I ever watched. He was supposed to play in the National Invitational. Then his sponsor disappeared. The room shifted. Not loudly. It shifted the way a floor shifts when someone realizes there is something buried under it. Richard looked away from the board for the first time. Eleanor saw it. Denise saw it. Even Preston, who made a career out of missing uncomfortable truths, saw it. Mr. Bell continued, voice lower now. People said Marcus lacked the right image for corporate backing. I never forgot that phrase. It was cruel then, and it sounds cruel now. Caleb looked at Richard, not accusing, not pleading, only seeing. Richard did not speak. He could not. The CEO who could silence rooms had finally found one that would not give his words back to him. Richard Whitmore stared at the chessboard as if the pieces had rearranged not only the game, but the past he had kept stored behind expensive walls. Marcus Carter. The name had not been spoken at his table in 13 years, yet it returned with the weight of something unpaid. He remembered a conference room with gray carpet, a young black chess player in a borrowed blazer, a sponsorship proposal placed neatly in front of him, and a marketing director saying the campaign needed a cleaner story, a broader appeal, a face that would make investors comfortable. Richard had not said the cruel phrase himself. That was what he told himself for years. He had only nodded. He had only signed the withdrawal. He had only moved money from one column to another. But looking at Caleb now, he understood how cowardly the word only could become when a powerful man used it to wash his hands. Denise saw the recognition pass through him, and her grip on the pitcher loosened. She had known part of the story, but not this part, not Richard's face inside it. Marcus had come home quiet that week, carrying his chess bag over one shoulder and a smile too tired to be real. He told her doors closed sometimes, but another one would open. Then fewer calls came. Then no calls. Then illness arrived, and life became doctor visits, unpaid bills, and Caleb learning endgames beside a father who never let bitterness teach the boy. I remember your father, Richard said at last, but the sentence sounded small, almost useless. Caleb looked at him calmly. He remembered you too. The words were not sharp. That made them worse. Mr. Bell lowered his eyes. Eleanor covered her mouth with one hand, not dramatically, but as if she had finally understood the shape of the evening. Richard pushed his chair back. The legs made a rough sound against the floor, and several guests flinched at the suddenness of it. He stood, then stopped, uncertain what posture a man should take when apology was not enough. His gaze dropped to the $20 bill beside the board. The red stain had dried darker now. It looked cheap, not because of the amount, but because of the hand that had thrown it. Richard reached for it, but Caleb spoke before he touched it. Please do not. Richard's hand froze above the table. Caleb's voice stayed quiet. My mother earned her money tonight. I did not earn that. Denise inhaled sharply, not from embarrassment. From pride she could not hide fast enough. Richard withdrew his hand. For the first time all evening, he did what the room had never seen him do. He lowered his head. Denise, he said, turning toward her fully, no longer speaking toward the uniform or the job or the space near the door. I owe you an apology. I spoke about your son in a way no child should ever hear, and I used your position here to pressure both of you. That was wrong. Denise did not rush to save him from the discomfort. She stood in it with him. Yes, sir, she said. It was. The room absorbed that simple truth. Richard swallowed. Then he looked at Caleb. And I owe you more than an apology. Caleb's hand closed around the chipped knight in his pocket. My dad used to say the board shows what people are willing to protect. Mr. Bell nodded faintly, as if Marcus himself had spoken through the boy. Richard looked at the board again, at the trapped king, the quiet bishop, the rook holding the line, the knight that had made everything possible from a square no one respected. Then I protected the wrong things, he said. No one comforted him. No one applauded. That was not the kind of moment this was. It was smaller and heavier, a man finally meeting the cost of his own convenience. Olivia slid from her chair and walked to Caleb's side. She looked at the board, then at him. "Could you teach me why that worked?" she asked. Caleb turned to his mother first, asking permission without words. Denise's eyes shone under the chandelier light, but her voice stayed steady. "Only if you want to." Caleb looked back at Olivia and nodded once. "Every piece matters," he said. Richard sat down slowly, no longer at the head of a performance, but at the edge of a lesson he had not paid for and did not deserve. The lesson did not continue for long. It could not. Some moments are too heavy to turn into ordinary instruction, and even Olivia seemed to understand that. Caleb showed her the first trap, then the second, then how the knight on f7 had not been a mistake, but a question Mr. Bell had answered too late. His voice stayed soft. He did not perform. He did not punish anyone with brilliance. He simply explained the board the way Marcus Carter had once explained it to him, with patience, with care, with the belief that understanding should never be used to make another person feel small. Around the table, the guests listened in a silence no money had purchased. Preston Hale had stopped touching his glass. The retired judge stared down at his folded hands. Eleanor watched Denise, not Caleb, as if the real lesson stood in a black uniform near the kitchen doorway, holding herself upright after years of swallowing words that should never have been placed on her tongue. Richard remained seated. The head of the table no longer looked like a throne. It looked like one more chair. When Caleb finished, Mr. Bell stood slowly. He buttoned his jacket with careful fingers, then gave Caleb a small bow of respect, not theatrical, not grand, just honest. "Your father would have been proud," he said. Caleb looked down at the board. For the first time that night, his face changed. The strength stayed, but something tender moved beneath it, something young and unguarded. "Thank you," he said. Denise set the pitcher on the sideboard because her hands could no longer hold it steady. Richard rose again, but this time he did not command the room. He walked around the table, stopping several feet from Denise and Caleb, leaving enough space for them to choose whether he deserved to come closer. "I will make this right," he said. The words sounded sincere, but sincerity was not the same as repair, and Denise knew that. She looked at him with the calm of a woman who had learned the difference between promises and proof. "Then start by remembering that my son was never a lesson for your guests," she said. Richard lowered his eyes. "You are right." Caleb stood from the chair. His sneakers touched the rug softly. He reached toward the board, lifted the black king, and placed it upright again instead of leaving it fallen. The gesture was so small that some people missed it, but Denise did not. Mr. Bell did not. Richard did not. Caleb was not there to destroy anyone. He was there to leave the truth standing. Then he picked up the chipped knight from his pocket and set it beside the board for one breath, letting the old plastic piece rest among the expensive carved ones. It looked out of place and perfectly at home. Olivia stared at it like it belonged in a museum. "Was that his?" she asked. Caleb nodded. "It was the piece he gave me when I learned that pawns can become queens." No one smiled. The sentence was too simple for that. Denise stepped beside him and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Come on, baby," she said gently. "It is late." They walked toward the kitchen hallway together, not hurried, not ashamed. The swinging door opened, and warm kitchen lights spilled across the dining room floor. Just before Caleb crossed into it, Richard spoke his name, then stopped when he realized he had nothing worthy to add. Caleb turned anyway. Richard looked at the boy, then at the stained $20 bill still lying on the white tablecloth. He picked it up at last, folded it once, and held it in his closed hand like evidence. "I am sorry," he said. Caleb looked at him for a quiet second. "Do better than sorry," he answered. Then he left with his mother. The door eased shut behind them. No music filled the room. No applause came. Only the soft ticking of the old clock, the cooling candles, and the abandoned chessboard remained under the chandelier light. On the board, every piece was still. Outside, beyond the iron gate, the city moved in the cold blue dark. Inside, the people who had come to dinner sat without speaking, listening to the silence Caleb Carter had left behind, a silence shaped like justice, gentle enough to breathe in, strong enough to stay.